Well, hello. Welcome to this week's What's the Tea conversation series about relevant topics in our community. This week, 4 Press House staff, Niato Abraham, Becca Bedell, Ginger Morgan, and Erica Liu, that's me, sit down for 30 unscripted minutes to discuss current events, social and political issues, and more, not as experts, but as human beings dedicated to dialogue. And today's topic is a juicy one. I don't know you, but I hate you. So before we jump in, let's start with our ritual by sharing what we are drinking this afternoon. And I'm going to start because I feel like mine's very thematic. I do not know what I'm drinking because it is in a language that I don't read. A student gave it to me. I put it in. I'm drinking it. But unlike our theme, I don't hate it. It's pretty good, but I have no idea what it is. So what are you all drinking?
I have my lovely honeybee mug, and I have some very aromatic peppermint tea.
I have a Press House Apartments mug from downstairs with I snagged a bag of the peach ginger turmeric, which is one of my favorites.
Everything you're drinking sounds way more exciting than mine. I do have one of my favorite mugs. It's my donut mug. It says "Donut Stop Believing." And I'm drinking just some plain old black coffee.
All right, good. So I don't know you, but I hate you. A little bit of context for this topic and why we chose it. With the 2020 presidential election less than 2 weeks away, the partisan rhetoric and tensions around the country are at an all-time high. Violent encounters between police, protesters, and citizen militia, they've been posted on social media. So those are only the ones we're seeing, alongside videos of customers attacking store clerks who have asked them to put on a face mask. There are plenty of examples of strangers hating strangers. Sometimes these encounters have resulted in fatalities, as we saw just a couple of months ago when 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 people during the protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin, that were occurring because of the police shooting of Jacob Blake. So, as we approach Election Day, anxieties are high. Trump has refused to commit to a peaceful transition of power and has told white nationalists to stand by. The vitriolic exchange on the national stage, they are mirrored at the local level as people from differing political affiliations view each other with deep suspicion. The definition of hate, I looked this up to be kind of precisely, according to dictionary.com, it is to dislike intensely or passionately, to feel extreme aversion for or extreme hostility toward another. I do not think it is a far stretch to say that there are people from both the Democratic and Republican and other parties who do not know one another, but certainly hate each other. So today we want to take a closer look at this tendency to hate people we do not even know. And to start off the conversation, I want to pose the question another way to my fellow colleagues. Who have you hated that you did not know, and what was going on inside your head and your heart? So talk to each other.
This is a very squirm-inducing topic.
Yeah, I was about to say, when we initially thought about asking this question, I literally, for those who are watching, I literally left the screen. We were in a meeting and I was like, nope, I'm leaving. I got to go somewhere else. And I ran away. So I'm having a little bit of the same internal reaction right now.
Right, it's super embarrassing, especially if you're a person of faith, to confess that you hate someone. Like, it feels very exposing. And I guess, having said that, I'll go first. And I'm going to reach back in time. There are probably more recent accounts, but this one feels relatively safer to disclose. So when I was in college and coming out as lesbian and sort of discovering my understanding of feminist consciousness, Phyllis Schlafly was that figure. Like, she was a national spokeswoman for the moral majority and for a view of womanhood that was rooted in a kind of evangelical Christian faith. And she was rabidly anti-gay. And so I think really underneath that reaction to her rhetoric and her public statements was first and foremost, I mean, I was angry and I was afraid. People that I care about and who are in my life thought in very similar ways, and it was much safer to hate her than people I love.
I'll share next. It's interesting because I had a few examples in mind thinking before this conversation. And then as Erica was talking in the beginning, a completely different one popped into my head. So I'm going to go with that one. And we'll see what comes out of my mouth. So this is back in 2017, right when I had just started seminary. And for context, this was right around the sort of beginning of this whole national explosion around Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem in the NFL. And I come from a very small conservative town in Missouri. So there are like a lot of people that I went to high school with sharing X, Y, Z about how this is terrible. We shouldn't be kneeling. You should just shut up and play. And I think a lot of that chipped away at me in ways that I didn't really anticipate. And the day that I would say it reached the point of me hating someone I didn't know, and I still have no idea who this person is because it was some random post that someone made on Facebook and someone I knew shared it, and it just sent me over the edge. My whole body broke out, like I was sweating. I said many curse words to myself. And I just in that moment, I hated them so much because it was like they were spitting in my face. And I didn't quite understand why I felt so personally implicated in what they had said. But I just remember being so angry, so angry at them. And then also, by extension, all of the people who I knew from like my childhood who shared that post and agreed with them. And it just that was a really dark, honestly, couple of months where I was just full of hatred for that person in particular. And then by extension, all of the people who were sharing that idea.
I feel like I have examples along the more along the lines of Ginger and me. Like I have plenty of, random occurrences over the last several years of getting really angry at inflammatory rhetoric that's shared on Facebook, or being really irrationally angry at politicians, mostly like politicians who are attacking trans rights or gay rights. But for whatever reason, the incident that's stuck in my mind since we brought up this topic is not anyone that I ever met knowingly face to face, but when I was a senior at Princeton, the dorm room directly underneath mine, we were in this building with huge glass windows along the living room. We were on the second floor, and then there was a room beneath us, and this was like one of the most visible dorm rooms on campus. Just like had the sort of decor on the wall that screamed like American Christianity, just like covered in crosses and like I think other like vaguely, vaguely patriotic or nationalist vibe, but like it was mostly the crosses. And so this was ironically about 7 months before I became a Christian myself. But I just remember, I remember a very particular incident where I was walking up that road past the building to come around and enter, and I like, their blinds were open, and I just looked in, and I'm like, and I just started cursing about that display of like what I assumed was, I started cursing about how those people probably hate to have like a whole bunch of queers and queers and trans people living right above them, because like the 2 units, it was me and my friends right above them, like we were all queer. And I just like this sort of bitter, like spiteful, almost like pitting us against each other feeling, because I just had so internalized the expectation that if someone was really like sort of blatantly boisterously Christian in that way, that at Princeton especially, those were often the folks who were really vocally conservative and really vocally against me. And like, I wound up becoming a Christian later that same school year. And so I wound up like eating a lot of my own words and rethinking a lot of like just that assumption, like that I didn't actually know that about those people. There's a good chance I was right to some extent, but like, so just reflecting on the times in my life where I've made very snap judgments in moments like that come up really strongly without any sort of person-to-person contact.
I definitely feel like I resonate with all of you in some way, in things and examples in my life. But since Becca kind of last shared about the very visibly self-proclaimed Christians, maybe one I would add for me is I think in my gut reactions, hated a lot of other Christian clergy. And so I think sometimes maybe we hate in some ways what is also in some ways in a weird way closest to us as a Christian clergy person myself. But usually because of what I assume in terms of ways they will talk about things or signal. A lot of it tends to be language that is used or assumptions made, and things I'll see that they will say that get proclaimed in the public space that make me just my blood boil. And I think it's because it feels threatening, because it doesn't match what I understand myself to be as a Christian clergy. And so I just kind of get myself into knots and in a really not clergy-like frame of mind. It would not be being a good example of Christ-like grace and compassion if what was actually going on in my head was visible. And it's embarrassing, actually, the way I won't even know this person, but I will have so many opinions about who I think they are. And then maybe one more I would add on that I tend to have gut reactions are when I'm driving, and certain drivers, the way they drive or bumper stickers that are on their car can invoke many visions in my head that are not charitable. So I want to kind of poke a little more at this and ask a follow-up question to that. As you think about those instances about hating somebody you didn't know, what did you gain from hating this stranger, and what did you lose?
Well, I don't know if this is quite my first impulse, I guess, of what I gained was some semblance of protection. Like my anger and my judgment, if I can judge them as wrong and hurtful and dangerous, then they become the bad guy. And whatever label they're putting on me, I can fend off. So part of it is just, and that's a very protective response, right? Some sense of protection, even though it has no actual effect on them as a human being. And it's all for some kind of, I don't know, false sense of security or protection. And what I lost was clearly some of my own access to compassion for other people, and sense of grace, shared humanity.
I mean, yeah, wow. I want to run away again. Ginger, what you just said made me really, because I don't think I'd ever really thought about that experience in terms of what I gained or what I lost. I think I've always just like placed it in the category of like, those people are, because I don't think I still hate them anymore, but I still in my mind, like they're terrible people. But I think that you're right in that even though I still have a sense that like what they were saying was deeply morally objectionable, my, not just my initial emotional reaction, but the way I held on to it and like allowed it to sort of crystallize into hate definitely chipped away at my ability to see them as a person in the aftermath. And I can see that in the way I think about some of those specific people now. And also like if I see or hear thoughts kind of in that realm expressed by someone, I'm so much quicker to sort of place them in a separate category that is like very easy to dismiss. But I think also, and this is another thing that I think is interesting in the midst of this broader political conversation, what I gained was like a greater sense of my own identity, like, which I think is often kind of why hate is such like an easy thing for people to foment, because like in the act of hating them, I became more committed to my own identity as a Black person. And I think that that kind of plays out in various ways for different groups, but yeah, I'll stop there.
So your identity becomes sharpened over and against something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I have to add to those reflections. I feel very, very similar ways. Just sort of the feeling of safety that you get from making snap judgments and reaffirming your own rightness, in contrast with someone else's wrongness. And I think that's a defense mechanism to hide the fear of feeling unsafe, because obviously that hatred and those gut reactions come from a place of experienced violence, and so we take justified examples of distrust and dislike from our lived experience or from the world around us, and then use them to fuel unjustified or questionably justified gut reactions along the same lines in the future. That's just sort of, that feels biologically what it was. But I will say, like looking back on it, having shortly thereafter become a person of faith, I feel like in the long run, what I gained was humility. Um, in the sense that I now understand that there is a whole world of nuance and a spectrum of differences within the identity of Christian or even person of faith that I had just completely written off for the first 19, 20 years of my life. And like in a lot of ways, that was an easier world to live in, was one where just anyone who was religious was, you know, just off the table, basically, as someone I would even consider talking to or connecting with. Um, and so there's a growth from that and a difficult yet satisfying nuance.
I think, if I'm really honest, what I gained from hating people that I don't know is a sense of superiority. That I'm better, that I'm righter. That's not even a right word, but yeah, I think it's all of that sense of fear and protection and things, but also a sense that, you know, the superiority and what I've lost, I think, in those times when I'm wrapped up in that passion is peace. It is not a peaceful feeling at all. There's a lot of energy in it, but I felt completely robbed of peace. And it's not that I want to be indifferent, but I do really value that sense of peace. And I think also what I've lost is connection, because the more I let that kind of hatred or passion feeling stay in me, whenever I feel like I'm going to encounter those strangers that fit in that category, I feel more isolated and fearful and that I can't connect. And so, yeah, I think peace and it becomes increasingly isolating, and I lose connection with the people around me. And I think part of that points to the fact that we have often ended up in these bubbles where we can only be with people who think, talk, look, act like us. So actually, I think I've lost quite a lot when I've really kind of been in those places. So I'm wondering, as you guys have reflect upon your experiences with hating somebody you didn't know, if you've ever experienced being surprised by something in that experience. Maybe you learned something about that person or the situation, but have you ever been surprised and maybe interrupted as you were in those moments of feeling hate, or maybe later you discovered something?
I mean, I sort of already shared mine. Like, I didn't expect that I would be taking communion for the first time like 6 months later, and sobbing over it and not understanding what I was doing. So, I mean, yeah.
I guess I don't know that mine so much around my initial Phyllis Schlafly story. I think I read somewhere that she had a gay son. And so I think that was sort of a surprise and sort of not. Even in the same category of people I've spent energy hating was James Dobson, who was the founder of Focus on the Family. And I remember being surprised reading some of his child psychology work and parenting work, because much of it was actually quite sound and useful to me. And I realized that there was all this other stuff that I really objected to, that I thought was damaging and it held a view of God and scripture that I don't condone, I don't agree with. But it didn't, this nuance of nobody is all one thing, right? And that I could learn something or value something that he had written about parenting and child psychology was quite a surprise. And, helped me realize none of these things are altogether simple.
I don't know if I have one. I've been like trying to think of something. And I think one thing that has happened to me over the past few years is like, especially in the wake of the 2016 election, is like, I try to live in such a way that I'm not surprised by things anymore. So even if someone whose opinions about me or about people who look like me or about politics like might diverge slightly from what I initially anticipate, there's just like, I don't know, for some reason it doesn't trip the switch of surprise anymore. And I don't know whether that's like a defense mechanism or something, but yeah.
I think I'm more surprised by good things from someone I distrust or dislike than I am about being surprised by things that I judge to be negative and disappointing. I have that same kind of nothing much surprises me of the how bad can it get category.
Well, that just about is 30 minutes. And I wonder if you guys have any kind of final thoughts as we head into what will probably be a pretty contentious month, if not longer ahead, that you might, oop, that's my timer saying we need to wrap up. I guess I'm even looking for myself, like if you were going to offer me one tool or thing that you kind of hold on to in your own life as you think about this reflex to hate or feel that, is there something that you guys hold on to that helps you navigate that when that comes up in you?
I remember different situation. I was carrying a lot of resentment and anger toward a particular person. And it sort of applies to anyone that I hold in my mind with, anger or resentment, judgment. And this very dear friend of mine said, yeah, I've had that experience. And the only thing that really made a difference was I prayed for that person every day. And I prayed for God, however you understand God, for their well-being, like not to affirm or disagree or change them or, for a conversion of any kind to how I thought, but prayed for their well-being and for God in their life. And that was all I could do. And the major transformation was of me.
Let me know whatever magic steps I can take to get to that place of groundedness.
Some of the prayers were offered with gritted teeth. Like it was, yeah. It was neither pleasant nor my first impulse.
Yeah.
It became easier over time. That's all I can say.
For me, this isn't the whole solution. I don't know if it's even a solution, but something I hold in my mind is like to not let myself stop at hating without understanding, but to really try and dig in and understand, like, why is this person believing what they believe or saying what they're saying or doing what they're doing? And then once I feel like I really understand it, maybe I'll still really intensely dislike them, but it doesn't carry that just like acidic internal toxicity in the same way, because then maybe I can see where that's coming from in the world and work on it.
Perhaps it is a reflection of my my person, where I am as a morally developed human, but I don't have any magic tricks to stay away from reacting with those things. This is something that like was literally actually having a conversation with my partner about last night. Like, how do I not hate certain things or people, especially in this moment? And I don't know if I'm ready to try that prayer thing. I don't
Right.
know.
Praying for people that you're pretty sure hate you, it's something else. Like, and partly it's letting go of things you can't control. Like for me, I can't fix it, you know? So.
Well, I think what is safe to say is that it's not easy. It is something that we may do with gritted teeth and have to practice. It's a muscle that maybe most of our country has not been working on. It's very weak, and that we maybe should do that together in community, and help each other, because sure as heck left to my own devices, I don't want to do it. But there is maybe some hope that we can encourage one another. That's all the time we have for this week. What's the tea? The next time we get together in 2 weeks will be the day after Election Day. So there will probably be lots of tea to talk about, and maybe opportunities to practice flexing that love your enemy thing that Jesus talked about. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.